Her sleeve slipped while pouring his coffee, revealing bruises she tried to hide. The maid stammered an excuse about being clumsy, but the Mafia boss noticed the fear in her eyes. What she didn't know, he just decided she was under his protection, and nothing would stop him from keeping that promise. Adrian Moretti didn't believe in coincidences. At 6:47 a.m., he sat in his study overlooking the Chicago skyline, reading through financial reports that would bore most people to tears. But Lorenzo wasn't most people. He was a man who noticed everything. The tremor in someone's voice during negotiations, the half-second hesitation before a handshake, the way people's eyes darted when they lied. So when Elena Rivera walked into his office carrying his morning espresso, he noticed immediately her sleeve was pulled down too far. Not just down, deliberately stretched over her knuckles, clutched in her fist like she was trying to hold something together or hide something. "Good morning, Mr. Duca," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It always was. In the 3 months she'd worked here, he'd never heard her raise her voice above normal conversation level. "Morning, Maria." He watched her approach his desk, her movements, careful, practiced. She set the small porcelain cup down with both hands, and that's when it happened. The sleeve slipped just for a second, maybe 2, but it was enough. Dark purple bruises wrapped around her wrist like ugly bracelets. Some were fresh, deep purple, and angry. Others were fading to that sickly yellow-green color that meant they were a few days old. His eyes caught them before she yanked her sleeve back down, and he saw her freeze. She knew he'd seen Maria, he said calmly, setting down his pen. "Sit down." "Oh, I should get back to sit." It wasn't loud. Lorenzo never needed to be loud, but something in his tone made people listen. She sat in the leather chair across from his desk, looking like she wanted to disappear into it. "What happened to your wrist?" "Nothing, sir. I'm just clumsy." She forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "I bumped it on the cabinet door yesterday while cleaning." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, studying her. Maria was 28. He knew from her employment file. Petite with dark hair usually tied back in a neat bun, and brown eyes that rarely made direct contact. She was thorough, quiet, and she never asked questions. Those were the qualities his housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, had praised when recommending her. But Rosa Kim hadn't mentioned the fear because that's what Lorenzo saw now. Not embarrassment about being clumsy. Fear, raw and real. "Both wrists?" he asked gently, noticing how she was unconsciously rubbing her other arm. Maria's face went pale. "Ah, yes, I'm very clumsy." "Show me, Mr. Duca." "Really, I'm fine, Maria." He kept his voice soft but firm. "Show me." Her hands trembled as she slowly pulled back her sleeves. Both wrists bore the same marks. Finger-shaped bruises. Someone had grabbed her hard. Recently, Lorenzo felt something cold settle in his chest. He had built an empire in the shadows of Chicago. He'd done things he wasn't proud of. Made decisions that kept him awake some nights. But he had rules. Lines he didn't cross. And one of those lines was simple. You didn't hurt people who couldn't fight back. Someone had hurt Maria. Someone had grabbed this woman hard enough to leave marks that looked days old, and she was terrified enough to lie about it. Who did this? Nobody. "I told you." "Maria?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to understand something. You work in my house, under my roof. That means you're under my protection. Do you understand?" She looked at him with those frightened doe eyes, and for a moment he thought she might tell him. Her lips parted slightly, and he could see her weighing the options in her head. Then she stood up abruptly. "I really should get back to work. The breakfast dishes." Maria, but she was already backing toward the door. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Duca. I promise I'll be more careful." And then she was gone, practically fleeing from his office. Lorenzo sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the door she'd closed behind her. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person in this house he trusted as much as himself. Mrs. Chun. My office now. 3 minutes later, his housekeeper appeared. Patricia Chun had worked for the Duca family for 30 years. She was 62, sharp as a blade, and one of the few people who wasn't afraid to tell Lorenzo when he was being an idiot. "You bellowed," she said dryly, closing the door behind her. "Maria, tell me about her." Mrs. Chen's expression shifted immediately to concern. "What happened?" "She's hurt. Bruises on both wrists, finger marks. She's terrified, and she's lying about it." Jesus. Mrs. Chin sank into the chair Maria had just vacated. "I didn't know. I swear, Lorenzo, I didn't know. What do you know about her personal life?" "Not much. She keeps to herself. I know she was married, but she's divorced now. She needed work badly when she applied. I could tell. Good references from her previous employer, a family on the North Shore. They moved to Connecticut and she couldn't go with them." "Why did she need work badly?" Mrs. Chin shrugged. "Divorce is expensive. She mentioned once that she was living with her sister temporarily, trying to get back on her feet." Lorenzo drummed his fingers on the desk. "Find out where she goes after work. Don't follow her yourself. Have Ben Navarro do it. Discreet. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to, and if anyone's bothering her." "You think it's the ex-husband?" "I think someone grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises, and she's too scared to report it." He met Mrs. Chen's eyes. "Nobody touches my people, Patricia. Nobody." Mrs. Wayne Chin nodded slowly. She'd seen this side of Lorenzo before, the protective, almost paternal instinct that kicked in when someone under his care was threatened. For all his dark dealings, Adrian Moretti had a code. "I'll talk to her," Mrs. Chin offered. "Maybe she'll open up to another woman. Do that, but carefully. She's already spooked." Lorenzo turned back to his computer, but his mind was elsewhere. And Patricia, have security pull the footage from the cameras outside the property. Every angle going back 2 weeks. "You think someone followed her here?" "I think," Lorenzo said quietly, "that Elena Rivera is running from something, and I intend to find out what." After Mrs. Chin left, Lorenzo sat alone in his study, the financial reports forgotten. Outside his window, Chicago was waking up. People heading to work, living their normal lives, unaware of the darker currents that ran beneath the city's surface. Somewhere in the city, someone had hurt Maria, had grabbed her, scared her, made her afraid to ask for help. Adrian Moretti picked up his phone again, this time calling his head of security. "Tony, I need you to run a background check." Quietly. "Elena Rivera, employed here as a maid. I want everything. Where she lived, who she was married to, any police reports, restraining orders, anything that might explain why she's terrified." "How fast do you need it?" Lorenzo looked at the closed door of his office, remembering the fear in Maria's eyes. Yesterday he ended the call and sat back in his chair. Outside, the sun was rising over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside Lorenzo's chest, something darker was rising too. Someone had made a mistake. They'd hurt someone under his protection, and Adrian Moretti always made sure mistakes were corrected. Leo Vargas had been Lorenzo's head of security for 12 years. He tracked down thieves, handled threats, and once found a rat in the organization before the man could do real damage. But searching for information on a scared maid, that was a first. By noon, he was knocking on Lorenzo's study door with a manila folder in hand. "That was fast," Lorenzo said, gesturing him inside. "It wasn't hard." Tony dropped the folder on the desk. His expression was grim. "You're not going to like it." Lorenzo opened the folder. Inside was a photograph of a man in a Chicago Police Department uniform, broad-shouldered, sandy blonde hair, cold blue eyes, and a smile that didn't reach them. "Officer Jacob Hayes," Tony said, married Elena Rivera 6 years ago. Divorced finalized 8 months back. He's stationed at the 14th District. Works patrol, but he's got connections. His uncle is a deputy chief. Lorenzo's jaw tightened and 2 domestic disturbance calls to their old address in the past year. Both times, Maria refused to press charges. Neighbors reported hearing fights. Then she filed for divorce and got a restraining order. Tony pointed to another document which expired 3 weeks ago, and she didn't renew it. Why not? That's the question, isn't it? Tony crossed his arms. I checked with a contact at the courthouse. She tried to renew it. Mitchell showed up with a lawyer, a good one, probably paid for by the uncle. They argued she had no new evidence of harassment. Judge denied the extension. Lorenzo felt that cold anger settling deeper, so she's unprotected legally. Yeah. And boss, there's more. Tony pulled out his phone, showing Lorenzo a photo he'd taken from public social media. It showed Jacob Hayes at a bar, armed around another uniformed officer, both holding beers. He's tight with at least a dozen cops in his district. If Maria tried to report him now, it'd go nowhere. They'd protect their own. Lorenzo closed the folder carefully. Where does she live? Apartment in Pilsen, sharing with her sister Rosa. Building's got no security. Maria takes the bus to and from work. Tony paused. You want me to put someone on her? Not yet. I don't want to scare her more than she already as Lorenzo stood walking to the window. But I want cameras watching that bus stop. And I want to know if Mitchell goes anywhere near her. Already on it. I've got Ben Navarro reviewing the footage from outside our gates. If Mitchell's been following her here, we'll know by tonight. After Tony left, Lorenzo tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting to Maria. Somewhere in his house, she was cleaning, organizing, trying to make herself invisible while carrying bruises from a man who was supposed to protect and serve. The irony wasn't lost on him. Adrian Moretti, a man who operated outside the law, was more disgusted by a cop's abuse than most of the so-called good citizens would ever be. Around 2 hours in the afternoon, Mrs. Chin found him still in his study. I talked to her, she said quietly, settling into the chair across from him. Or tried to, and she's terrified, Lorenzo. I brought her tea, sat with her in the kitchen, told her this was a safe place. Mrs. Chen's voice was heavy with frustration. She thanked me, said she was fine, and then I watched her hands shake so badly she almost dropped her cup. Did she say anything useful? She mentioned she's been having trouble sleeping. Keeps hearing noises outside her apartment at night. She tried to laugh it off, said the neighborhood's just loud, but Mrs. Chin shook her head. That girl is being stalked and she knows it. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. A text from Ben Navarro, his lead surveillance tech. You need to see this. Coming up now. 2 minutes later, Ben Navarro arrived with his laptop. He was young, 26, with nervous energy and skills that made him invaluable. He set the laptop on Lorenzo's desk and pulled up security footage. This is from 3 days ago, Ben Navarro said, clicking play. 6:47 p.m. Maria's leaving through the side gate. The footage showed Maria walking out, her purse clutched tight to her chest. She looked around nervously before heading down the street toward the bus stop. Watch, Ben Navarro said, forwarding the footage 30 seconds. A dark blue sedan rolled slowly past the gate. The driver wore sunglasses despite the evening hour. And though the angle wasn't perfect, Lorenzo could make out sandy blonde hair. That's him, Tony said from the doorway. Lorenzo hadn't heard him come in. Ran the plates, registered to Jacob Hayes. He's following her from work, Mrs. Chen breathed. That son of a... There's more. Ben Navarro interrupted, clicking to another file. Yesterday, same time, the same car, the same slow crawl past the property. This time, the footage from a different camera caught the moment when the car stopped at the bus stop where Maria waited. She saw it, and even through the grainy footage, Lorenzo could see her body language change, shoulders hunched, head down, hands gripping her purse like a lifeline. The car sat there for 3 minutes. Just sat there idling while Maria stood frozen on that corner. Then it drove away. "He's not touching her," Ben Navarro explained. "He's smart, just watching, reminding her he knows where she works, when she leaves, where she goes." "It's intimidation. It's terrorism," Lorenzo said coldly. "He's hunting her." Mrs. Chin stood abruptly, her usual composure cracking. "We need to do something. We can't just watch this happen. We're not going to." Lorenzo looked at Tony. "I want to know everything about Jacob Hayes. Where he lives, where he drinks, who his friends are, what time he takes his morning coffee. I want his schedule, his habits, his secrets." "His uncle's a deputy chief," Tony reminded him. "If we move against a cop, I know what he is." Lorenzo's voice was quiet, but it carried weight, which is why we're going to be very, very careful. We're not going to touch him. Not yet. Then what are we doing? Lorenzo looked back at the frozen image on the screen. Maria, small and scared on that street corner while a predator circled. "We're watching, we're learning, and we're documenting everything." He turned to Ben Navarro. "I want cameras on every route Maria takes. I want footage of every time Mitchell follows her, watches her, intimidates her. I want dates, times, and locations." "Building a case?" Tony asked. "Building ammunition," Lorenzo corrected. "Mitchell thinks he's untouchable because of that badge. He thinks Maria is alone. He thinks wrong." Mrs. Chin moved to the door, then paused. "What do we tell Maria?" "Nothing. Not yet." Lorenzo sat back down at his desk. "If we tell her we're watching him, she'll panic. Might do something unpredictable right now. She needs to act normal. Keep coming to work, keep her routine. She's suffering." Rosa Kim protested. "I know." Lorenzo's voice softened. "But if we move too fast, we might make things worse. Mitchell's not stupid. He's staying just inside the law. We need him to make a mistake." After they left, Lorenzo sat alone with the security footage still playing on the laptop. He watched Maria's frightened posture, saw how small she tried to make herself. Jacob Hayes thought he could hurt someone with impunity because he wore a badge. He was about to learn that some shadows had teeth. That evening, Lorenzo sat in his private study nursing a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. The ice had long since melted. His eyes were fixed on the multiple monitors Ben Navarro had set up, showing different camera angles from around the property and nearby streets. At 6:43 p.m., his phone rang. Ben Navarro. "Boss, you need to come down to the security room now." Lorenzo didn't ask questions. He took the elevator down to the basement level where his security operations were housed, a room most of his household staff didn't even know existed. Ben Navarro was there with Tony, both men's faces grim. 3 large monitors displayed paused footage. "We went back further," Ben Navarro said without preamble. 2 weeks of footage from every camera we have access to. Plus, I hacked into the traffic cameras at the intersection near our property, and the bus stop Maria uses. "Show me," Lorenzo said, setting his glass down on the console. Ben Navarro clicked play on the first monitor. This is from 11 days ago. The footage showed a bus stop 3 blocks from Lorenzo's mansion. Maria stood there alone, checking her phone. Then, the blue sedan appeared, pulling up to the curb. Derek Mitchell got out, still in his police uniform. Maria saw him and immediately started walking away fast. Mitchell followed. "Watch," Ben Navarro said quietly. The traffic camera caught what happened next. Mitchell caught up to Maria, grabbed her arm, spinning her around. Even without audio, Lorenzo could see she was pleading with him. Mitchell leaned in close, saying something, his grip on her arm visible and tight. When Maria tried to pull away, he grabbed her other arm too. Lorenzo's hands curled into fists. The confrontation lasted maybe 90 seconds. Then Mitchell released her, suddenly got back in his car and drove away. Maria stood there on the sidewalk, trembling, rubbing her arms. The bruises, the ones Lorenzo had seen that morning. This is where they came from. There's more, Tony said. Show him Tuesday. Marcos switched to another file. Different angle. Same bus stop, but this time it was raining. Maria had an umbrella and she was practically running to the stop. Mitchell's car was already there waiting. This time when he got out, he didn't wait for her to see him. He intercepted her, blocking her path. She tried to go around him. He moved with her, backing her against the bus shelter. His hand came up, not hitting, but pointing, jabbing toward her face as he spoke, threatening. A bus pulled up. Maria saw her escape and darted around Mitchell, practically jumping onto the bus. Mitchell watched it drive away, then got back in his car. And yesterday, Ben Navarro said, his voice tight with anger. This is the worst one. The third video showed Maria leaving Lorenzo's property through the side gate. She looked exhausted, probably from a long day of work. She was checking her phone, not paying attention. Mitchell appeared from around the corner on foot this time, not in his car. Maria gasped. Lorenzo could see it even without sound, and backed up against the gate. Mitchell advanced, trapping her there. This time he wasn't just grabbing her arm. He had both hands on her shoulders, pushing her back against the iron bars of the gate. He was in her face, close enough that Maria had turned her head to the side. She looked terrified. Tears were streaming down her face. The confrontation lasted longer this time. 3, maybe 4 minutes. At one point, Mitchell's hand moved to her throat, not choking, but resting there. A threat. A reminder of his power. Finally, someone else appeared on the sidewalk, an elderly man walking his dog. Mitchell immediately stepped back, his whole demeanor changing. He nodded politely at the stranger, then walked away casually like nothing had happened. Maria slid down the gate to sit on the sidewalk, her whole body shaking with sobs. Lorenzo felt something crack inside his chest. The professional distance he usually maintained, the cold calculation that made him effective, it was burning away, replaced by pure rage. Turn it off, he said quietly. Ben Navarro paused the video. The room was silent except for the hum of computers. He's been doing this for weeks, Tony said. Maybe longer. Those are just the times we caught on camera. Who knows how many other times he's cornered her when there weren't cameras around. Lorenzo turned to face his security chief. He's a cop. Yeah. Protected by his badge, by his uncle, by the whole goddamn system. Yeah, Tony repeated. And Maria can't report him because they'll bury it. She can't get another restraining order because the judge already said no. She can't run because she needs this job and he knows where she works. Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm. She's trapped. That's about the size of it. Tony agreed. Lorenzo walked to the monitors, studying the frozen image of Maria's terrified face. Did you make copies of everything? Triple backed up cloud storage, encrypted drives, the works. Good. Lorenzo turned back to them. Get me everything on Jacob Hayes. And I don't mean public records. I want the real story. Where does his money come from? A patrol cop with a wife, ex-wife, and an apartment. Shouldn't be driving a car that nice. What bars does he drink at? Who are his friends? Does he gamble? Does he owe money? Does he have secrets? You want us to investigate a cop? Ben Navarro asked carefully. I want you to investigate a predator who happens to wear a badge. Lorenzo's eyes were cold. Mitchell thinks he's untouchable. He thinks because he's got an uncle in the department and a uniform in his closet, he can terrorize a woman without consequences. So, what are we going to do? Tony asked. Lorenzo looked back at the screen, at Maria's tear-stained face, at the hand on her throat. We're going to show him that badges don't stop bullets. Tony's eyes widened. Boss? That was a metaphor, Tony. Lorenzo's voice softened slightly. I'm not going to kill a cop. That would bring heat we can't afford. And more importantly, it would scare Maria even more than she already is. Then what? Lorenzo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We're going to do something worse than killing him. We're going to destroy everything that makes him feel powerful. His reputation, his protection, his badge. He moved toward the door, then paused. A man like Mitchell, his identity is wrapped up in that uniform in the respect he thinks it commands. We take that away and he's nothing. That could take time, Ben Navarro said. Then we'd better get started. Lorenzo opened the door. I want a full report by tomorrow morning. Everything you can find. Financial records, associates, habits, dirt. If Jacob Hayes has skeletons in his closet, I want to know where the bodies are buried. After they nodded and turned back to their computers, Lorenzo took the elevator back up to his study. The sun had set over Chicago, and the city lights twinkled below like stars that had fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, Maria was in her shared apartment, probably still scared, still looking over her shoulder. And somewhere else, Jacob Hayes was probably having a beer with his cop buddies, laughing, feeling invincible. Lorenzo picked up his phone and made a call. Consolier, he said when Vincent Caruso answered. We need to talk. I have a situation that requires your particular expertise. How delicate. We're going after a police officer. There was a long pause. I'm listening. Good, Lorenzo said. Because we're going to need to be very, very careful about this. He hung up and stared out at the city. Jacob Hayes had made a crucial mistake. He'd hurt someone under Adrian Moretti's protection. Now it was time to teach him what happened when you cross the wrong shadow. The next morning, Lorenzo found Maria in the library dusting bookshelves with mechanical precision. She moved quietly like she was trying not to disturb the silence itself. Maria, he said softly from the doorway, can you come to my office, please? Her whole body went rigid. The duster fell from her hand. I'm not finished here yet, Mr. Duca. I can come later if now, please. He kept his voice gentle but firm. It's important. She followed him down the hallway like someone walking to their execution. Her hands were clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. When they reached his office, he gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same one she'd fled from 2 days ago. Sit down, Maria. She sat on the very edge of the chair, ready to bolt at any moment. Lorenzo closed the door and moved to his desk, but he didn't sit. Instead, he leaned against it, trying to make himself less intimidating. It probably didn't work. He was 6'2", and built like someone who could handle himself in a fight. But he tried. I'm going to ask you something, he said quietly. And I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that? Maria's eyes were fixed on her lap. Yes, sir. Who's hurting you? Nobody. I told you I'm just Maria. He waited until she looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears. I know you're scared. I know you think if you tell me the truth, something bad will happen. But I need you to trust me. I can't, she whispered. I can't talk about it. Why not? Because her voice broke. Because talking about it makes it worse. Every time I've tried to get help, it just makes him angrier. There it was him. Your ex-husband, Lorenzo said. It wasn't a question. Maria's head snapped up, fear flooding her face. How did you? It's my job to know things. He moved around the desk and pulled his own chair closer to her, sitting down so they were at eye level. Jacob Hayes, Chicago PD, 14th District. You were married for 5 years, divorced 8 months ago. She started crying then, silent tears streaming down her face. Please don't get involved. Please. You don't understand what he's capable of. Tell me he'll hurt you or he'll have his friends arrest you on fake charges. Or Maria Lorenzo's voice was calm, almost soothing. Look at me. She did, her face wet with tears. I'm not afraid of Derek Mitchell. But I need to understand what's been happening. Can you tell me? For a long moment she said nothing. Then, like a dam breaking, it all came pouring out. "He won't leave me alone," she sobbed. "I thought when the divorce was final, I'd be free. I got a restraining order. I moved in with my sister. I changed my phone number, but he always finds me. He waits at the bus stop. He follows me to work. He shows up outside Rose's apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning and just sits there in his car watching." Lorenzo felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. "Have you tried to report him?" "Yes." The word came out like a cry of frustration. "I tried. I went to his station. You know what they said? They said Derek was a good officer, that I was probably exaggerating because I was bitter about the divorce. One of them told me I should be grateful he even wanted to stay in my life." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He is the police, Mr. Duca. He asked the law. Who do you call when the person hurting you wears a badge? What about the restraining order? It expired 3 weeks ago. I tried to renew it, but Derek brought a lawyer, an expensive one. They said I had no proof of recent harassment. The judge denied it." She wiped at her tears with her sleeve. "And even when I had it, it didn't stop him. He'd find ways to get close without technically violating it. He knows every loophole. What does he want?" Maria's laugh was bitter and broken. "Me back. He thinks I'm his property. He says I destroyed his reputation by divorcing him, that I made him look weak in front of his friends. He says if he can't have me, he'll make sure I'm too scared to have a life without him." She looked up at Lorenzo with desperate eyes. "I can't sleep. I can't eat every time I leave the house. I'm terrified he'll be there. And I can't quit this job because I need the money. But I'm so scared he's going to follow me here and cause trouble and you'll fire me." "Stop." Lorenzo's voice cut through her panic. "I'm not going to fire you. But Maria, listen to me very carefully." He leaned forward, his voice steady and sure. "You work in my house. You are under my protection. That means something. Do you understand, Mr. Duca? You can't fight the police. I'm not fighting the police. I'm protecting someone who works for me from a man who's abusing his power." He stood up and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "Jacob Hayes thinks he's untouchable because of that badge. He thinks he can terrorize you because you have nowhere to turn. I don't," Maria said quietly. "I don't have anywhere to turn." Lorenzo turned back to face her. "Yes, you do. You have here. You have me." "Why?" The question came out small and confused. "Why would you help me?" "I'm just a maid. Because what he's doing is wrong." Lorenzo said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "And because I don't let people get hurt on my watch. You don't understand. He is friends. His uncle is a deputy chief. If you try anything—" Maria Lorenzo moved back to his chair and sat down, looking directly into her eyes. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. Derek Mitchell will never touch you again. I don't make promises I can't keep." She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or deception. "How can you promise that?" Because Lorenzo said quietly, "I'm very good at what I do. What if he retaliates? What if he comes after you? Let me worry about that." "But Maria," his voice was gentle but firm, "all I need from you is to keep coming to work. Act normal. Don't do anything different. Can you do that? You want me to just pretend everything's fine while he's out there for now?" "Yes. I know that's hard, but I need you to trust me." He stood up and walked to his desk, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back. "This is my private cell phone number. If Mitchell approaches you, if you feel unsafe, if anything happens, you call me immediately. Day or night, understand?" Maria took the card with shaking hands. "Mr. Duca, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He opened the office door for her. "Just know that you're not alone anymore." After she left, Lorenzo stood at his window, watching her walk back toward the kitchen. Her shoulders were still tense, her movements still careful, but something had shifted. She'd told someone the truth. She'd asked for help, and Adrian Moretti had every intention of delivering it. He picked up his phone. "Tony, we're moving to the next phase. I want everything on Mitchell by this afternoon. And I mean everything." Vincent Caruso arrived at the mansion at 3 that afternoon, walking into Lorenzo's study with the confidence of a man who'd been the family's consigliere for 20 years. He was 60, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and had kept the Duca organization out of federal prison more times than anyone could count. "You want to go after a cop?" Frank said without preamble, settling into the leather chair. "Have you lost your mind?" "Good afternoon to you, too." Frank Lorenzo poured them both a scotch. "And I don't want to go after him. I have to." "No, you don't." Frank took the glass but didn't drink. "You want to? There's a difference. Walk me through this." Lorenzo handed him the manila folder. Frank opened it, studying Derek Mitchell's photograph with the practiced eye of someone who'd evaluated threats for decades. Cop young. Connected. Frank looked up. His uncle's a deputy chief. Vincent Mitchell, 30 years on the force, runs the 14th and 18th districts. Jesus. "Lorenzo." Frank tossed the folder on the desk. "You're talking about touching someone in a family that bleeds blue. You understand what that means?" "I understand that he's been stalking and assaulting one of my employees for months." "Your maid," Frank clarified. "Not your daughter. Not your sister. A maid you've known for 3 months." Lorenzo's eyes flashed with anger. "Does that matter in terms of risk assessment?" "Yes, it absolutely matters." Frank leaned forward. "Listen to me. If we move on this cop, if we even look at him wrong and something happens to him, the entire Chicago PD will be breathing down our necks. They'll investigate every business you own, every associate you have, every transaction you've made in the last decade. They'll want blood. I'm aware of the risks." "Are you?" Frank's voice rose slightly. "Because I don't think you are. We've worked hard to keep a low profile. We don't make headlines. We don't attract attention. We operate in the shadows, and that's how we survive." He gestured at the folder. This is stepping into the light and painting a target on our backs. So, I should do nothing." Lorenzo's voice was dangerously quiet. "Let him keep terrorizing her. I'm saying you need to think about this strategically, not emotionally." Frank finally took a sip of his scotch. "What's the end game here?" "You scare him off. Fine, but if he's as connected as you say, he'll come back with friends. You hurt him. The heat will be incredible. You kill him." Frank shook his head. "That's a war we can't win." Lorenzo stood and walked to his laptop, turning it around so Frank could see the screen. "Watch this." He played the footage from 2 days ago. Derek Mitchell backing Maria against the gate, his hand on her throat, her tears, her terror. Frank watched in silence. When it ended, his expression had changed slightly, but his voice remained cautious. "It's bad. I'm not saying it isn't, but Lorenzo, think about what you're risking here. Think about all the people who depend on this organization staying off law enforcement's radar. I am thinking about them." Lorenzo closed the laptop. "I'm thinking that if word gets out that someone can hurt people under my protection without consequences, we look weak. We look like we can be pushed around by the police." Frank emphasized, "This isn't some rival family or a business competitor. This is law enforcement. This is a criminal with a badge. In the eyes of the law, there's no difference. A dead cop is a dead cop, and they will never stop looking for who did it." Lorenzo turned to face his consigliere. "I'm not going to kill him, Frank." "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Lorenzo admitted. "That's why you're here, to help me figure out how to handle this without bringing the kind of heat you're worried about." Frank was quiet for a long moment, studying Lorenzo's face. "You're really not going to let this go, are you? Would you? If someone was hurting someone you'd promised to protect?" Frank sighed heavily. Show me everything you have on him. For the next hour, Lorenzo walked Frank through all the evidence, the surveillance footage, the background check, the restraining order, Maria's confession. Frank listened, asked questions and made notes on a legal pad. His uncle's the real problem. Frank finally said Vincent Mitchell has juice in this city. He's friends with the mayor, the superintendent, half the city council. If we go after Derek, and the uncle gets involved, we're talking about institutional protection. So how do we neutralize that? You're asking the wrong question. Frank tapped his pen against the pad. The question isn't how to neutralize it. The question is how to make sure we never have to. Meaning we don't touch Derek Mitchell. Not physically, not even close. Frank's eyes gleamed with a strategic mind that had kept the organization safe for 2 decades. We make him radioactive. We make it so his own department wants nothing to do with him. Lorenzo felt a spark of understanding. Go on. Every cop, even dirty ones, has enemies. People they've crossed, arrests they've botched, money they've skimmed. Frank leaned back in his chair. We find his vulnerabilities, not to hit him, to expose him. We let the system eat its own internal affairs, and the media, and anyone else who might have a grudge. Frank smiled coldly. We don't need to kill Jacob Hayes, Lorenzo. We need to kill his credibility, strip away his protection, make him just another civilian with anger issues and a history of domestic violence. Lorenzo moved back to his desk, his mind racing through possibilities. He pulled up the footage again, watching Maria's terrified face, Mitchell's threatening posture. How long would that take? He asked. Weeks, maybe a month. These things have to develop naturally. Can't look orchestrated. Maria doesn't have a month, Lorenzo said quietly. He's escalating. Today it's intimidation. Tomorrow it could be worse. Then we put protection on her. Quietly, people he won't notice. He's a cop. He's trained to notice. Frank stood, walking to the window. There's another option. What? Offer her money. Set her up somewhere far from Chicago. New identity. New life. Mitchell can't follow what he can't find. Lorenzo shook his head immediately. She has a sister here. A life. Why should she have to run? Because it's safer, Frank said bluntly. For her and for us. Lorenzo looked at the frozen image on his screen. Maria's tears, her fear, her helplessness. He thought about what she'd said in his office. Who do you call when the person hurting you wears a badge? No one. That was the answer. You called no one because the system protected its own. Unless someone outside the system decided to even the scales. We're not sending her away, Lorenzo said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a decision made. And we're not going to physically touch Mitchell. You're right about that. The risk is too high. Frank turned from the window, relief crossing his face. Good, but we are going to destroy him, Lorenzo continued carefully, methodically. We're going to remove every piece of armor that makes him feel untouchable. His badge, his reputation, his connections, his protection. He met Frank's eyes. We won't hit him, Frank. Well, remove his armor first, then we'll let him fall. Frank studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this my way. Controlled. No improvising, no emotional decisions. Agreed. And if at any point the heat gets too intense, we pull back. Deal. Lorenzo extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it. 2 men in the shadows plotting the downfall of a man who wore the light. Tony Messino was good at his job for one simple reason. He understood that information was currency. And over the next 48 hours, he was about to make Adrian Moretti a very rich man. We start with the money, Tony said, spreading documents across the conference table in Lorenzo's secure basement office. Ben Navarro sat at his laptop, screens glowing. Vincent Caruso observed from the corner, arms crossed. Mitchell's official salary is $62,000 a year, Tony continued. He rents an apartment in Lincoln Park, $1,500 a month, drives a 2023 Dodge Charger, eats out 4-5 times a week at places that aren't cheap. So he's living above his means, Lorenzo said. Way above, Ben Navarro pulled up bank statements on the main screen. His checking account shows regular deposits matching his paychecks. But look at this. He highlighted several cash deposits. $2,000 here, $3,500 here, $1,500. All cash, irregular intervals. How'd you get his bank records? Frank asked. Ben Navarro grinned. His bank has terrible cybersecurity. I didn't even need to try hard. That's felony hacking, Frank pointed out. Only if they can prove it, Ben Navarro shrugged. And only if they know to look. Lorenzo studied the numbers. 43,000 in cash deposits over the last year. Where's it coming from? That's the fun part, Tony said, pulling out another file. I've got a CI confidential informant who works in the 14th district. Janitor keeps his head down. Nobody notices him. He says Mitchell's been running a side hustle for at least 2 years. What kind of hustle? The old-fashioned kind. Traffic stops in nice neighborhoods. Find something, drugs, open container, whatever. Offers to make it go away for cash. Sometimes he works with his partner, Officer Ryan Webb. They split it. Lorenzo felt disgust curl in his stomach. He's shaking people down. Yep. And it gets better. Tony slid a photograph across the table. This was taken 3 nights ago outside a bar in Bridgeport called Murphy's Pub. The photo showed Jacob Hayes in civilian clothes sitting at an outdoor table with 3 other men. Lorenzo didn't recognize 2 of them, but the third one he did. That's Jimmy Kowalski, Frank said, identifying the man before Lorenzo could. Runs protection rackets on the south side. Dirty as they come. Mitchell drinks with him twice a month, Tony confirmed. My guy says they've got an arrangement. Mitchell tips Kowalski off about raids, helps him move product when heat's coming down. In exchange, Kowalski gives him cash and protection if Mitchell ever needs muscle. So our cop is crooked. Lorenzo said, What else? Ben Navarro took over typing rapidly. I dug into his arrest record. Found something interesting. 2 years ago, Mitchell arrested a guy named Carlos Mendez for drug possession. Mendez claimed Mitchell planted the drugs, but nobody believed him. He got 5 years, and Mendez's girlfriend at the time filed a complaint saying Mitchell sexually harassed her during the arrest, grabbed her inappropriately, made comments. The complaint went to Internal Affairs. Ben Navarro pulled up a document. Guess who investigated it? His uncle, Frank guessed. Close. His uncle's best friend, Lieutenant Paul Brennan. Complaint was deemed unfounded. Case closed. Lorenzo leaned forward. You're saying there's a pattern of covering for him. I'm saying there's a whole network covering for him, Ben Navarro corrected. Look at this. He pulled up a web diagram on the screen showing connections between different officers. Jacob Hayes sat at the center with lines connecting to at least 8 other names. These are all cops in his district or nearby districts, Ben Navarro explained. They drink together, work security jobs together, their wives or friends. It's a tight group, and here's the thing, every single one of them has had at least 1 complaint filed against them. Excessive force, misconduct, harassment, and every single complaint was either dismissed or buried. They protect each other, Tony said. It's a brotherhood. You don't rat on your brothers, even when your brothers are criminals, Lorenzo added coldly. Frank moved closer to study the diagram. This is good. This is the kind of thing Internal Affairs would actually care about if it got in front of the right people. There's more, Tony said. Remember I said Mitchell works with his partner, Ryan Webb. Webb's got a gambling problem, owes money to 3 different bookies. I talked to one of them off the record, and he says Webb's been bragging about how he and Mitchell are untouchable because of Uncle Vincent. Lorenzo absorbed all of this, his mind working through the implications. Jacob Hayes wasn't just an abusive ex-husband. He was a corrupt cop operating within a corrupt system protected by family connections and a network of dirty officers who all covered for each other. "What about the uncle?" Lorenzo asked. "Vincent Mitchell. What do we know about him?" Tony gasped. "That's trickier. He's clean as far as I can tell. Real Boy Scout type. Or at least he appears to be. 30 years on the force, commendations, community service awards. If he knows his nephew is dirty, he's either ignoring it or doesn't want to believe it." "Or he's better at hiding his own dirt," Frank suggested. Maybe Tony didn't sound convinced, but I've had people digging and Vincent Mitchell's record is spotless. He's either genuinely clean or he's been very, very careful. Lorenzo stood and walked around the table studying the evidence spread before him. Financial records showing unexplained income. Photographs of Mitchell meeting with known criminals. A pattern of complaints mysteriously disappearing. A network of corrupt officers protecting each other. "This is good work," he said finally, "but it's not enough. If we drop this on internal affairs right now, they'll investigate." "Sure, but Mitchell's got friends. They could make it go away." "So what do we need?" Ben Navarro asked. "We need something undeniable." Lorenzo said, "Something so bad that even his uncle can't cover for him. Something that forces the department to act or risk public outrage." "Like what?" Lorenzo thought about Maria's tear-stained face, about the hand on her throat, about how many other women Mitchell might have hurt over the years. "We need to find his other victims," Lorenzo said quietly. "We need to prove this isn't an isolated incident. We need to show a pattern so clear that anyone who tries to cover for him becomes complicit." Tony nodded slowly. "I'll put feelers out. See if anyone else has complained about him, officially or unofficially. And keep digging into his finances," Lorenzo added. "Every cash deposit, every unexplained expense, build a timeline. If he's been dirty for 2 years, prove it month by month." "What about surveillance?" Ben Navarro asked. "You want me to keep eyes on him?" "Absolutely. I want to know everywhere he goes. Everyone he meets, everything he does." Lorenzo's voice hardened. "Jacob Hayes thinks he's protected. He thinks that badge makes him immune. We're going to document every crime, every shakedown, every abuse of power. And when we're done, we're going to hand it all to people who can't ignore it." Frank cleared his throat. "Just remember our agreement. We do this carefully. No direct action. I haven't forgotten." Lorenzo looked at each man in turn. "This isn't about revenge. This is about removing a predator from power. And the best way to do that is to let the system he's been abusing turn against him." Tony gathered up the files. "Give me 3 more days. I'll have enough to bury him." "You've got 2, Lorenzo said. "Maria is scared enough. I don't want to drag this out longer than necessary." After they left, Lorenzo sat alone in the dim conference room, surrounded by evidence of Derek Mitchell's crimes. Frank lingered by the door. "You know this could still blow back on us," the consigliere said quietly. "I know, and you're doing it anyway." "Yes?" Frank studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Just make sure it's worth it." After he left, Lorenzo looked at the photograph of Mitchell with his criminal associates, drinking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. "Soon," he thought. "Very soon, you're going to care." Maria found out on the 3rd day. She was cleaning the 2nd-floor hallway when she heard voices drifting from Lorenzo's study. The door was slightly ajar, and she shouldn't have listened. She knew that, but when she heard Derrick's name, she froze. Financial records show consistent deposits from shakedowns. Tony's voice said, "And we've got photos of him meeting with Jimmy Kowalski twice last month." "Good," Lorenzo replied. "What about other victims?" "Working on it." "I've got someone reaching out to." Maria's hand flew to her mouth. "They were investigating Derrick. They were actually investigating him. Panic seized her chest like a vice. She dropped the cleaning supplies and ran, not thinking, just moving, down the stairs and toward the kitchen. But Rosa Kim was there, and one look at Maria's face made the older woman reach for her. "Honey, what's wrong?" "He's investigating Derek," Maria gasped. "Mr. Duca is investigating him." "He can't, Mrs. Chun. He can't do that. Derek will know, he always knows." Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from concern to understanding. "Come with me." "No, I need to." "Maria," Mrs. Chen's firm tone cut through her panic. "Come with me now." She led Maria to Lorenzo's study and knocked. When Lorenzo opened the door and saw Maria's tear-stained face, his expression immediately softened. "Leave us," he said to Tony, who quickly gathered his files and left. Mrs. Chin squeezed Maria's shoulder once, then followed Tony out, closing the door behind her. Lorenzo guided Maria to a chair. She sat, but immediately stood again, too agitated to be still. "You can't do this," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, Mr. Duca, please stop looking into Derek. Maria, you don't understand." Her voice rose, desperation making her bold. "He'll find out. He has friends everywhere. Someone will tell him. And when he finds out someone's investigating him, he'll know it's because of me. He'll know." "I told you." Lorenzo remained calm, his voice steady. "Sit down. I can't sit." "I need you to promise me you'll stop." "Please." Tears streamed down her face. "He'll kill me. You don't know what he's like when he's angry." "He'll." Maria Lorenzo stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she had to look at him. "Breathe." She tried. Failed. Her breath came in short. Panicked gasps. "Look at me," Lorenzo said firmly. "Look at me and breathe." Something in his voice, the calm certainty, cut through her panic. She met his eyes and took a shuddering breath. "Good," he said. Again she breathed once, twice. The panic began to recede, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Now sit," Lorenzo said gently. This time she did, sinking into the chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Lorenzo sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough. You're investigating his finances. You're looking for other victims." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Duca, if he finds out, he won't. You can't know that." "Yes, I can." Lorenzo's voice was absolutely certain because we're being careful. Very careful. Jacob Hayes won't know anyone's looking at him until it's too late to matter. Maria shook her head frantically. "You don't understand how connected he is. His uncle is a deputy chief." "I know. And Derek has friends throughout the 14th district who cover for him." "I know that too." Lorenzo's expression was calm, almost gentle. "Maria, I wouldn't have started this if I couldn't finish it safely." "There is no safe." She stood again, pacing. "Don't you see? Every time I've tried to get help, it's made things worse. When I filed the restraining order, he followed me for 2 weeks straight. When I went to his station to complain, he showed up at my sister's apartment that same night. He always escalates. Always." "That's because before you were alone," Lorenzo said quietly. She stopped pacing. "What?" "You were alone, Maria, fighting a system designed to protect him. But you're not alone anymore." He stood, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't the cold calculation of a businessman. It was personal. "You're under my protection now. That means something." "But why?" The question burst out of her. "Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. I'm just a maid. Why would you risk? Because what he's doing is wrong." Lorenzo said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you work in my house, which means you're my responsibility. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I don't let people get hurt on my watch." Maria wanted to believe him. God, She wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But fear was a living thing inside her chest, clawing and desperate. "You don't know what you're starting," she whispered. "Yes, I do." Lorenzo moved to stand in front of her. And when he looked at her, it wasn't the way an employer looked at an employee. It was the way someone looked at a person they'd sworn to protect. "Maria, listen to me very carefully. Jacob Hayes will not touch you again. I promise you that." "You can't promise that." "I don't make promises I can't keep." The certainty in his voice made something crack inside her chest. She'd been carrying fear for so long, carrying it alone, letting it eat away at her until she felt like there was nothing left but terror and exhaustion. And here was this man, this dangerous man with shadows in his eyes, telling her she didn't have to carry it anymore. "What if you're wrong?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I'm not." "But what if?" "Maria." He waited until she met his eyes. "Have I lied to you yet?" She thought about it. He'd promised she wouldn't lose her job, and she hadn't. He'd promised to look into Derek, and he had. He'd given her his private number and told her to call if she felt unsafe. "No," she admitted. "Then trust me now," she wanted to. The words were right there, ready to tumble out, but years of fear held them back. Lorenzo seemed to understand. He walked to his desk and pulled out a different card. Not his personal number this time, but something else. "This is the number for a security company I trust," he said, handing it to her. "If you feel unsafe at work, at home, anywhere, you call this number and say your name. Someone will be there within minutes. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. Just call." Maria took the card with trembling fingers. "I don't understand. Why are you doing all this?" Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because nobody should have to live the way you've been living. Looking over your shoulder, afraid to go home, wondering when the next attack will come." He paused. "You deserve better than that, Maria. And I'm going to make sure you get it." Tears spilled down her cheeks again. But these felt different. Not panic tears. Something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. What if this makes everything worse?" "It won't." Lorenzo's voice carried absolute conviction. "He won't touch you again, Maria. That's a promise." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his face that made her breath catch. He meant it. Every word. This wasn't just about protecting an employee or maintaining his reputation. This was personal. "Okay," she said finally, the word barely more than a breath. "Okay." "Okay," she said it again, stronger this time. "I trust you." Lorenzo nodded once, satisfaction flickering across his features. "Good. Now go home. Act normal. Let me worry about Derek Mitchell." As Maria left to study, she felt the fear still there, coiled in her chest. But for the first time in months, it wasn't alone. Something else was there too. Fragile and new. Hope. Lorenzo moved like a chess player, and over the next 48 hours, he made his opening moves. The first piece fell on Tuesday morning. Officer Ryan Webb, Jacob Hayes's partner and accomplice in shakedowns, arrived at the 14th District Station at 7 a.m. for his shift. At 7:32 a.m., 2 internal affairs investigators were waiting in the parking lot. Officer Webb, the lead investigator, said, flashing her badge, "We need to talk about some financial irregularities. Won't take long." Webb's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you won't mind answering a few questions." It wasn't a request. By 8:15 a.m., Webb was sitting in an interrogation room, sweating through his uniform, as the investigators laid out bank records showing unexplained deposits matching the exact amounts of traffic stops he'd made. Someone had anonymously sent the records to Internal Affairs with a detailed timeline. Webb knew he was caught. By noon, he turned on Jacob Hayes, giving a detailed statement about their shakedown operation in exchange for a lighter punishment. Lorenzo received a text from his source inside the department at 12:47 p.m. First domino down, Webb is singing. The second piece fell that same evening. Ben Navarro had been busy using encrypted networks and anonymous proxies. He'd uploaded a carefully curated package of information to 3 whistleblower websites and 2 Reddit communities dedicated to police accountability. Nothing that could be traced back to Lorenzo's organization, just enough to create questions. The post read, Chicago PD Officer Derek Mitchell, badge number 4729, 14th District, $43,000 in unexplained cash deposits over 18 months, regular meetings with known criminal Jimmy Kowalski, multiple domestic violence complaints mysteriously dismissed. Someone should ask why. Attached were bank statements with account numbers partially redacted for privacy. Enough to verify authenticity, not enough to be illegal. Photos of Mitchell meeting with Kowalski. Public records of dismissed complaints. By midnight, the post had 2,000 upvotes and 300 comments. Local activists were tagging Chicago news outlets. A reporter from the Tribune had already started making calls. The third piece fell on Wednesday afternoon, and it was the most devastating. Jimmy Kowalski, Mitchell's criminal contact and protector, was arrested at 3:30 p.m. outside his gym in Bridgeport. The charges? Possession with intent to distribute weapons violations and conspiracy. The arrest wasn't random. Lorenzo had made a single phone call to a federal prosecutor he'd met years ago during a charity event. The prosecutor was clean, ambitious, and had been trying to nail Kowalski for years. Lorenzo had simply pointed him toward a warehouse where Kowalski stored product. Anonymous tip, Lorenzo had said, worth checking out, the prosecutor checked. Found enough cocaine to put Kowalski away for a decade. Never questioned where the tip came from. With Kowalski in custody and facing serious time, Jacob Hayes had just lost his criminal backup, his source of side income, and his muscle. By Wednesday evening, Jacob Hayes felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. He sat in his apartment scrolling through the Reddit posts about him, his jaw clenching tighter with each comment. His phone buzzed. Ryan Webb's name appeared on the screen. "What the hell did you tell IA?" Derek demanded when he answered. "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. They had everything. Bank records, dates, amounts. You gave me up. I had to. They were going to charge me with Derek hung up." His hands were shaking with rage. Someone was coming after him. Someone with resources. Someone who knew things they shouldn't know. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his Uncle Derek. Vincent Mitchell's voice was cold. "My office tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. "Uncle Vince, I can explain." 8 a.m. The line went dead. Derek threw his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Everything was falling apart, and he didn't understand how or why. Ryan had cracked. Kowalski was arrested. His finances were suddenly public knowledge. And worst of all, the stories were spreading. People were asking questions. He thought about Maria, about that job of hers at the Duca mansion, about how this all started after he'd been following her there. A cold suspicion began forming in his mind. Thursday morning, Lorenzo received a full report from Tony. "Internal Affairs has formally opened an investigation into Mitchell," Tony said, reading from his phone. "They're interviewing everyone who's worked with him. Webb's statement gave them probable cause to dig deeper." "Good," Lorenzo said. "What about the uncle?" "Vincent Mitchell is distancing himself publicly anyway. Word is he's furious. Feels his nephew made him look bad." Tony looked up. "Mitchell's been reassigned to desk duty pending the investigation. No badge, no gun, no patrol." Lorenzo felt satisfaction settle in his chest. The first phase was complete. Derek Mitchell's armor was cracking. "What about his network?" Frank asked from his position by the window. The other dirty cops who protect him scattering like rats, Tony reported. Nobody wants to be associated with him now that IIA is watching. 2 officers have already requested transfers to different districts. Ben Navarro looked up from his laptop and the media circling. I've got alerts set up for his name. 3 local news sites have picked up the story. One's calling him Chicago's dirty cop problem. Channel 7 is running a segment tonight about police accountability. Lorenzo stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Jacob Hayes was watching his world crumble, feeling the fear and helplessness that Maria had lived with for months. He's going to retaliate, Frank warned. Men like Mitchell don't go quietly. When they feel cornered, they lash out. I know, Lorenzo turned back to face them. Which is why we need to move faster. We've cracked his foundation. Now we bring the whole structure down. How? Tony asked. The media exposure was phase 1. Internal affairs is phase 2. In Lorenzo's eyes were cold and calculating. Phase 3 is making sure everyone in the city knows exactly what Jacob Hayes is. Not a cop, a predator who hid behind a badge. That's a big play, Frank said cautiously. He's escalating his surveillance on Maria. Ben Navarro interjected, pulling up new footage. Look at this from yesterday. The screen showed Derrick's car parked across the street from Maria's apartment building. He'd sat there for 3 hours, just watching, waiting. Lorenzo felt anger ignite in his chest. Mitchell was getting desperate, which made him dangerous. We need to move now, Lorenzo said. Tony, contact every news outlet that's covering the story. Feed them more. Give them the restraining order Maria filed. Give them the complaints from other women that were dismissed. Make them understand this isn't just about corruption. It's about a violent man who used his badge to terrorize people. That could expose Maria, Frank warned. We'll keep her name anonymous. But the story needs to be told. Lorenzo's voice was firm. Derrick Mitchell needs to become radioactive, so toxic that even thinking about helping him becomes career suicide. Tony nodded. I'll make the calls and increase security around Maria. Lorenzo added, if Mitchell's going to break, he's going to do it soon. I want eyes on her apartment, on her route to work, everywhere she goes. After they dispersed, Lorenzo sat alone in his study. The pieces were moving exactly as he'd planned. Mitchell's protection was crumbling. His allies were abandoning him. His secrets were becoming public knowledge. But Frank was right about one thing. Cornered animals were dangerous, and Jacob Hayes had just become very, very cornered. Friday morning at 6 a.m., Chicago woke up to a storm. The Tribune ran the story on their front page, Chicago Cops' Dark Secret. Years of abuse, corruption, and cover-ups exposed. Channel 7 led their morning broadcast with it, the anchor's voice grave. A Chicago police officer is at the center of a growing scandal involving domestic violence, corruption, and a pattern of abuse that was allegedly covered up by his department for years. The Sun-Times went even harder. Badge of Dishonor. How Jacob Hayes used police power to terrorize women and profit from crime. And they all dropped at the same time, 6 a.m. coordinated, devastating. Lorenzo had made sure of it. At the Duca mansion, Maria stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the television mounted on the wall. Rosa Kim had turned it on for the morning news, and now they both watched in stunned silence. The screen showed Derrick's police photograph next to images of court documents, bank statements, and the now infamous photo of him meeting with Jimmy Kowalski. Sources tell us that Officer Mitchell deposited over $40,000 in unexplained cash over an 18-month period, the reporter said. Additionally, multiple women have come forward anonymously to describe a pattern of harassment and intimidation by Mitchell, including one ex-wife who obtained a restraining order against him before it expired earlier this year. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. They were talking about her, but they weren't using her name. Lorenzo had kept his promise. The Chicago Police Department's Internal Affairs Division has opened a formal investigation, the reporter continued. But critics are asking why it took public pressure to force action when complaints about Officer Mitchell have been filed and dismissed for years. Mrs. Chin reached over and squeezed Maria's hand. "It's working," she whispered. "He's losing." On screen, they cut to footage of Derek's precinct where reporters had gathered outside the building. A spokesperson stood at a podium looking uncomfortable. "The allegations against Officer Mitchell are being taken very seriously," the spokesperson read from a prepared statement. "He has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The Chicago Police Department does not tolerate corruption or abuse of power in any form." Maria felt tears streaming down her face, but these weren't tears of fear. They were something else entirely. Relief, disbelief, hope. By 8:00 a.m., the story had gone viral. Chicago PD was trending on Twitter. Local activists were organizing a press conference. The mayor's office was fielding calls from angry citizens demanding accountability. And in the 14th District Station, Derek Mitchell's former colleagues were in full panic mode. "This is a disaster," one sergeant muttered to another in the break room. "If they dig deeper, they're going to find all of us." "Nobody talk to reporters," another officer warned, "and nobody defend Mitchell. He's radioactive now. Anyone who goes near him is going down with the ship." The union representative who planned to defend Mitchell suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The lawyer his uncle had hired returned his retainer. The officers who used to drink with him twice a week weren't returning his calls. Jacob Hayes had become a pariah overnight. At City Hall, Deputy Chief Vincent Mitchell sat in his office with his head in his hands. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, internal affairs, the superintendent, the mayor's office. Everyone wanted answers. His nephew had destroyed his reputation. 30 years of service, and now people were questioning whether Vincent had been covering for Derek all along. "I didn't know," he kept saying to anyone who would listen. "I didn't know the extent of it." But the truth was more complicated. He'd known Derek had problems. He'd known about the complaints. He just never wanted to believe his nephew was capable of being this corrupt. Family loyalty had made him blind. Now that loyalty was costing him everything. By noon, the story had expanded beyond Chicago. CNN picked it up. So did MSNBC. How one police officer's abuse of power reveals systemic failures in law enforcement accountability became the narrative. Social media exploded with commentary. Police accountability advocates held up Jacob Hayes as a perfect example of why reform was necessary. Defenders of law enforcement scrambled to distance themselves from him, emphasizing that he represented a tiny minority of bad cops. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted to talk about it. And in all that noise, all that attention, Jacob Hayes's carefully constructed armor shattered completely. At 2:17 p.m., Lorenzo received the call he'd been waiting for. "He's been formally suspended," Tony reported. "No badge, no gun, no access to the precinct." The superintendent made the announcement an hour ago. "They're calling it suspension without paying criminal investigation." "Criminal investigation," Lorenzo repeated, satisfaction evident in his voice. "The FBI is getting involved. That meeting with Kowalski triggered federal interest. They're looking into corruption, racketeering, possible civil rights violations." Tony sounded almost gleeful. "Boss, they're going to tear his life apart, looking for evidence." Lorenzo closed his eyes, letting the news sink in. It had worked. Every piece had fallen into place exactly as planned. "What about his precinct?" Frank asked from across the desk. "Mass panic," Tony confirmed. "Officers are requesting transfers. IIA is interviewing everyone who ever worked with Mitchell. Nobody wants to be associated with him. 3 of his buddies have already lawyered up. Ben Navarro pulled up news coverage on the monitor. Every channel was covering it. Derek Mitchell's face was everywhere, always next to words like corrupt, abuser, disgrace. "How's Maria taking it?" Frank asked. Lorenzo had checked on her earlier. She'd been in the kitchen with Rosa Kim, watching the news with tears streaming down her face. When she'd seen him, she'd just whispered, "Thank you." "She's processing," Lorenzo said simply. "This is a lot." "It's about to get worse for Mitchell," Ben Navarro said, pulling up his laptop. "The floodgates have opened. I'm seeing posts from people claiming Mitchell harassed them during traffic stops. A woman just posted on Facebook that he threatened her when she tried to file a complaint. People who were too scared to speak up before. They're speaking up now." Lorenzo watched the stories multiply across social media. Jacob Hayes hadn't just terrorized Maria. He'd been doing it for years to multiple people, and now they all felt safe enough to tell their stories. "The thing about predators," Frank observed quietly, "is they never have just one victim. They have a pattern. We just helped make that pattern visible." At 4:00 p.m., Maria knocked on Lorenzo's study door. "Come in," he called. She entered slowly, looking smaller than usual in her simple work clothes. But when she met his eyes, Lorenzo saw something different there. The constant fear that had haunted her features was still present, but it was beginning to fade, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "I watched the news," she said softly. "All day, everyone's talking about him. Yes, they're saying he's going to be arrested. That the FBI is investigating." Her voice wavered. "Is it really over?" Lorenzo stood and moved around his desk. "Not yet, but we're close. He can't hurt you anymore, Maria. He has no badge, no authority, no protection. He's just a man now. And men can be held accountable." She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I never imagined anyone could actually stop him." "You're safe now," Lorenzo said firmly. "That's what matters." Maria looked at him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She stepped forward and hugged him, quick and impulsive, then pulled back immediately, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "It's fine," Lorenzo said gently. "You're welcome." After she left, Lorenzo returned to the window overlooking Chicago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in this city, Jacob Hayes was watching his world burn down around him. Tomorrow would bring the final act. Jacob Hayes had been drinking since noon. His apartment was a disaster. Empty beer bottles on the counter, his phone shattered against the wall, the TV playing endless loops of his public humiliation. Every channel, every site, his face everywhere labeled a predator, a corrupt cop, a disgrace. By 6 p.m., Saturday evening, rage had burned through the alcohol, leaving something cold and desperate behind. This was Maria's fault. All of it. If she hadn't divorced him, hadn't run away, hadn't gotten that job with whoever the hell was protecting her now, none of this would have happened. She destroyed his life, and she was going to answer for it. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. No badge, no gun. But he didn't need them. He just needed to make her understand what she'd done, what she'd taken from him. What Derrick didn't know was that Lorenzo had been 3 steps ahead. 2 blocks from Maria's apartment building in Pilsen, an unmarked surveillance van sat in the parking lot of a closed laundromat. Inside, Leo Vargas monitored 3 screens showing different angles of Maria Street. "Movement," Ben Navarro said from the passenger seat. "Blue sedan heading east on 18th Street. Tony leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "That's him." "You sure?" "Positive. Same car he's been using to stalk her." Tony picked up his phone and made a call. "He's moving. Get ready." 4 blocks away, Detective Sarah Chun of the Chicago Police Department sat in her own unmarked car with her partner, Detective Mike Torres. Both were good cops, the kind who actually cared about justice, not protecting bad officers. Lorenzo's source had carefully selected them for this operation. Heads up, Sarah said, ending the call. Target is inbound. You think he's actually stupid enough to approach her? Mike asked. Desperate people do stupid things. Sarah checked her service weapon, making sure it was secured. And this guy's got nothing left to lose. At the Duca mansion, Lorenzo stood in his security room, watching the feeds Ben Navarro had rigged. He could see Maria's apartment building, the street, the surveillance positions. Everything was in place. Frank stood beside him, arms crossed. You're sure about this? He's been watching her building for 3 days, Lorenzo said calmly. He's running out of money, out of friends, out of options. Cornered predators always go back to their victims. It's all they know, and if he doesn't show, then we wait. Lorenzo's eyes never left the screens, but he'll show. Men like Mitchell can't help themselves. Maria sat in her sister Rose's apartment trying to focus on the book in her lap. She couldn't. Every sound from outside made her jump. Every car door, every footstep. You should eat something, Rosa said from the kitchen. I'm not hungry, Maria. You need to. Rosa stopped mid-sentence. They both heard it. A car engine idling outside their building. The same sound that had haunted Maria for months. Maria's hands started shaking. She reached for her phone, finding Lorenzo's private number. At 6:27 p.m., Derek Mitchell parked across the street from Maria's building. He sat there for a moment, staring at the second-floor window where he knew she lived. Light was on. She was home. He could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Good. He got out of the car and crossed the street, his stride purposeful, angry. The building's front door wasn't locked. It never was in this neighborhood. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, muscle memory guiding him to apartment 2C. He pounded on the door. Maria, I know you're in there. Inside, Maria backed away from the door. Phone clutched to her chest. Rosa moved in front of her. Protective. Go away, Derek, Rosa shouted. We're calling the police. I am the police. He pounded harder. Maria, open this door right now. We need to talk about what you've done. In the surveillance van, Tony spoke urgently into his radio. He's at the door making threats. Officers, move in. Copy that, Sarah Hinn responded. We're 2 minutes out. Derek kept pounding. You ruined my life. Everything I worked for, my career, my reputation. You took it all. You think you can just hide in there? His hand went to the door knob, rattling it violently. I will break this door down, Maria. I will. Derek Mitchell. Sarah Chen's voice cut through his threats like a blade. She stood at the top of the stairs with her partner. Both with badges visible, both with their hands near their weapons. Step away from the door now. Derek spun around, his face contorting with rage. You don't understand. I understand you're violating a harassment order and making terroristic threats, Sarah interrupted. Hands where I can see them. There's no restraining order. It expired. A new one was filed this morning, Mike Torres said, moving to Derek's other side, blocking his escape. Emergency protective order granted by Judge Williams at 10 a.m. You were served by email, which you've apparently ignored. Derek's face went white. I didn't. I never got. Hands behind your back, Sarah ordered, pulling out handcuffs. This is bullshit. You can't. I'm a cop. You are a cop? Mike corrected, grabbing Derek's arm. Right now you're just another criminal. Get your hands off me. Derek tried to pull away, and that was the mistake Sarah had been waiting for. Resisting arrest, she said calmly, and both detectives moved in. The struggle was brief. Derek was outnumbered, and for all his rage, he was just one man against 2 trained officers. Within seconds, he was face first against the wall, hands scuffed behind his back. And that's when the news crews arrived. Lorenzo had made an anonymous tip to 3 local news stations 15 minutes earlier. Chicago cop Jacob Hayes is about to violate a protective order. If you want the story, be at address at 6:30 p.m. They'd come. They always did. Channel 7's camera caught Derek being walked out of the building in handcuffs, screaming obscenities. Channel 5 got footage of him being pushed into the back of the patrol car, still shouting about how this was all a setup, how he was being framed. The Sometimes photographer captured the perfect shot. Derek Mitchell, former police officer, in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and humiliation, being arrested in the same neighborhood where he'd terrorized his ex-wife for months. By 7:00 p.m., the footage was everywhere. The city watched a fallen cop's final moment, and the reaction was immediate. Social media erupted with comments ranging from satisfaction to outrage that it had taken this long. Local activists held an impromptu press conference praising the arrest. The mayor's office released a statement about accountability and justice. Jacob Hayes, who had once felt untouchable, had fallen about as far as a person could fall, and the entire city had watched it happen. In the security room, Lorenzo watched the news coverage with quiet satisfaction. Beside him, Frank allowed himself a small smile. "It's done," Frank said. "Not quite." Lorenzo pulled out his phone. "But close." At Maria's apartment, she sat on the couch with Rose's arms around her, both of them crying. Not from fear this time, from relief, from disbelief, from the overwhelming sensation of a weight. Finally, lifting her phone, buzzed. A text from Lorenzo. "It's over. He can't hurt you anymore." Maria read it through her tears and felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. Safe. Outside, the blue and red lights from the patrol cars painted the street in alternating colors. Neighbors had gathered, watching the scene unfold, whispering to each other about the cop who'd finally been arrested. And somewhere in the back of that patrol car, Jacob Hayes sat in handcuffs, his world destroyed, understanding too late that he'd made a fatal mistake. He'd hurt someone under Lorenzo DeLuca's protection. And in Chicago, that was the one thing you never did. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine. Maria came to work early, as she always did, but for the first time in months, she didn't check over her shoulder every few steps. She didn't skin the street for Derek's blue sedan. She didn't feel her heart hammering against her ribs with every approaching car. Jacob Hayes was in Cook County Jail, denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of charges. The FBI was building their case. The news had moved on to other stories, but the damage was permanent. Jacob Hayes's life, as he knew it, was over, and Elena Rivera could finally breathe. Mrs. Chin found her in the kitchen around 10:00, making coffee with a small smile on her face. The first genuine smile the housekeeper had seen in months. "He wants to see you," Mrs. Chun said gently. "In his office," Maria's smile faltered slightly. "Did I do something wrong?" "Honey, no." Mrs. Chun squeezed her shoulder. "Just go. Trust me." Maria climbed the stairs to Lorenzo's study, knocked softly and entered when he called. He stood by the window looking out at the city, but turned when she came in. "Sit down, Maria," he said, gesturing to the chair. His tone was warm, not the formal employer voice she'd grown accustomed to. She sat, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Lorenzo moved to his desk and picked up a manila envelope. "We need to talk about your living situation." Maria's stomach dropped. "I know Rose's apartment isn't ideal, but I'm saving money for my own place. I just need a few more months." Maria Lorenzo's voice was gentle. "I'm not asking you to leave your sister's place because it's a problem. I'm asking you to consider an alternative." He opened the envelope and pulled out a set of keys, setting them on the desk between them. "What are these?" she asked quietly. "Keys to an apartment in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms, secure building with a doorman and camera system. 24-hour security." He slid the keys toward her. "It's yours if you want it." Maria stared at the keys like they might bite her. "Mr. Duca, I can't afford. It's already paid for." 3 years up front, he pulled out papers. The lease is under a property management company I own. Your name doesn't appear anywhere on public records. Derrick wouldn't be able to find it even if he tried. I don't understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. You need a fresh start, Lorenzo said simply. Somewhere safe, somewhere Jacob Hayes's shadow doesn't reach. He paused. Rosa is welcome too if she wants to move with you. It's a two-bedroom for a reason. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, studying her. Because you deserve to feel safe in your own home. Because you've spent too long looking over your shoulder, his voice softened. Because no one in this house gets hurt ever. That includes after they leave for the day. The tears spilled over. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's already done. Lorenzo's tone was final, but not unkind. The apartment is there whether you take it or not. But I hope you will, Mr. Duca. There's more. He pulled out another document. I've arranged for private security. Nothing obvious. You won't even notice them most of the time, but there will be someone watching, making sure you're safe. At least for the next few months, until we're certain Derrick isn't a threat anymore. Maria pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Lorenzo stood and walked around the desk, leaning against it so he was closer to her level. Maria, you came to work for me 3 months ago. You did your job well, never complained, never asked for anything. When I learned someone was hurting you, it became my responsibility to fix it. But you've already done so much. The investigation, the arrest, you've given me my life back, and now I'm giving you the space to build a new one. Lorenzo's expression was serious but warm. You've been surviving for so long. It's time to start living. The tears came harder now, and Maria didn't try to stop them. She cried for everything, for the fear she'd carried, for the relief of watching Derrick arrested, for the overwhelming kindness of this man who barely knew her, but had risked so much to help her. Lorenzo handed her a tissue and waited patiently while she composed herself. I don't know how to thank you, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. Then don't. Lorenzo pushed the keys closer to her. Just take the apartment. Be safe. Be happy. That's all the thanks I need. Maria picked up the keys with shaking hands, feeling their weight. They felt like more than just metal. They felt like possibility, like freedom. Rosa will be thrilled, she said with a watery laugh. She's been talking about moving somewhere safer. Good. Lorenzo returned to his chair. Take the rest of the day off. Go see the place. If you need anything, furniture, supplies, whatever, Rosa Kim has a company credit card. Get what you need. Mr. Duca, I can't, Maria. He looked at her with those dark eyes that had once intimidated her, but now just felt protective. Please, let me do this. She nodded, clutching the keys to her chest. Thank you for everything, for believing me, for protecting me, for her voice broke, for caring. Of course I cared, Lorenzo said it like it was obvious. You work in my house. That makes you family in a way. And I protect my family. Maria stood on shaky legs and moved toward the door, then paused. She turned back to face him. Mr. Duca, when I first met you, I thought you were scary. All the rumors about who you are, what you do. She smiled through her tears. But you're the kindest person I've ever met. You saved my life. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. I'm not a good man, Maria. Don't mistake what I did for you as evidence of goodness. I have my reasons, my codes, my lines. Jacob Hayes crossed one of those lines. Still, she said softly. Thank you. After she left, Lorenzo sat alone in his study. He thought about what she'd said, that he'd save her life. Maybe he had, or maybe he'd just given her the tools to save herself. Either way, it was done. His phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Mitchell formally charged with corruption, extortion, stalking, harassment, and assault. DA is pushing for maximum sentence. Looks like 15 to 20 years. Lorenzo allowed himself a small smile. Justice delivered through channels that couldn't be traced back to him. The system had finally worked because he'd made sure it couldn't be ignored. He looked out at Chicago, at the sprawling city below. Somewhere in that city, Elena Rivera would move into a new apartment, start building a new life, sleep without fear for the first time in over a year. And Jacob Hayes would rot in a cell, understanding too late that some people, no matter how small they seemed, were under protection. He could never penetrate. Lorenzo turned back to his work, satisfied. The scales had been balanced, justice had been served, and Elena Rivera was finally truly free. 1 week later, Chicago was still talking. Channel 7's Evening News opened with an update. Former Chicago police officer Jacob Hayes appeared in court today, facing 17 criminal charges, including corruption, extortion, stalking, and assault. If convicted on all counts, he faces up to 25 years in prison. The anchor's co-host leaned in. What's remarkable about this case, David, is how quickly everything unraveled. 2 weeks ago, Mitchell was a decorated officer. Now he's facing a lifetime behind bars. Indeed, Sarah, and many are asking how such a comprehensive investigation came together so quickly. Some political analysts believe there was coordination behind the scenes, someone with resources and motivation to ensure Mitchell's crimes couldn't be ignored. An unseen hand, as some have called it. Exactly. The precision of the timing, the financial leaks, the witness testimonies, the media coverage, it all suggests careful orchestration. But by whom? That remains a mystery. The speculation had been building all week. Reddit threads dissected the timeline. True Crime Podcast devoted episodes to it. Everyone had theories about who had brought down Jacob Hayes with such surgical precision. But no one had proof. No one could trace it back to a source. That was the point. At the 14th District Station, the atmosphere remained tense. 3 more officers had been suspended pending investigation. The FBI had expanded their probe into the entire precinct. Deputy Chief Vincent Mitchell had taken early retirement, his reputation permanently tarnished by his nephew's crimes. The message was clear. The blue wall of silence had cracks now, and those cracks were letting in light. In Lincoln Park, Elena Rivera stood in her new apartment, still hardly believing it was real. The morning sun streamed through large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. The furniture Lorenzo had arranged to be delivered sat perfectly placed. Everything was clean, new, safe. Rosa emerged from the second bedroom, grinning. "I still can't believe this is ours." "For 3 years," Maria said, shaking her head in wonder. 3 years paid for. He's a good man. You're Mr. Duca." Maria thought about that. Good wasn't quite the right word for Lorenzo, but protective, honorable in his own way. Absolutely. At 7:30 a.m., Maria left her new apartment and walked to the bus stop. No one followed her. No blue sedan appeared. No shadow of fear crawled up her spine. For the first time in over a year, Elena Rivera walked through Chicago without looking over her shoulder. The doorman had greeted her warmly. A jogger passed by with a friendly nod. A woman walking her dog smiled. Good morning. Normal interactions, normal life. Maria felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. She was done crying, done being afraid, done letting Derek Mitchell take up space in her head. She was free. At the Duca mansion, Lorenzo stood on his private balcony overlooking the sprawling grounds and the city beyond. The morning air was crisp, autumn approaching. He held a cup of coffee he made himself, a rare moment of solitude before the day began. His phone buzzed, a text from Tony. Mitchell's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. DA said, "No, they're going to trial. They want to make an example of him." Lorenzo smiled faintly and pocketed the phone. Admiring your work? Frank Russo's voice came from behind him. The consigliere stepped onto the balcony, his own coffee in hand. Ensuring it's complete, Lorenzo corrected. The city's buzzing. Everyone wants to know who took down the untouchable cop. Let them wonder. Frank leaned against the railing, studying Lorenzo's profile. You know this sets a precedent. Word will get out. Not the details, but the message that you protect your people. Good. You're not worried that will make you a target. Every victim with a powerful abuser might come knocking. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment considering. Then they'll know where to find help. Frank chuckled softly. You're becoming sentimental in your old age. I'm 37. And getting soft, but there was no criticism in Frank's tone, only observation. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, Maria was on a bus heading to work without fear. Somewhere in Cook County Jail, Jacob Hayes was beginning to understand that his life, as he knew it, was over. And somewhere in Chicago's police stations, dirty cops were looking over their shoulders, wondering if they'd be next. The news is calling it divine intervention, Frank said. An act of justice that came out of nowhere. Not nowhere, Lorenzo said quietly. It came from someone who refused to accept that badges make people untouchable, who understood that sometimes the system needs help doing what's right. And if anyone traces it back to you, Lorenzo's expression hardened slightly. They won't. We were careful. Every leak was anonymous. Every tip was untraceable. Every piece of evidence was legally obtained or from sources that can't be connected to us. You sound very sure. Lorenzo took a sip of his coffee. Because we didn't do anything illegal, Frank. We didn't touch Jacob Hayes. We didn't plant evidence. We didn't threaten witnesses. We simply made sure the truth couldn't be ignored. By applying pressure in all the right places, by ensuring justice was served, Frank raised his cup in a mock toast. To justice, then, and to sending messages without saying a word. Lorenzo didn't respond, but his slight smile said enough. The balcony door opened again. Rosa Kim poked her head out. Maria just arrived. She wanted me to tell you she got the apartment settled, and thanks you again. How does she seem? Lorenzo asked. Happy. Mrs. Chen's smile was warm. Genuinely happy. I haven't seen her like this since she started working here. After Rosa Kim retreated inside, Lorenzo turned back to the city view. From here, Chicago looked peaceful, orderly, but he knew better. Beneath the surface ran currents of power, corruption, violence, people who hurt others and hid behind institutions. But sometimes, very rarely, those currents met resistance. Sometimes the shadows pushed back. Adrian Moretti had sent a message to Chicago, though few would ever know he sent it. The message was simple, but absolute. Touch what's mine, and even the law won't protect you. He'd shown that badges could be stripped, that protection could be removed, that predators could be exposed no matter how powerful they seemed. And most importantly, he'd shown one terrified woman that she didn't have to face her demons alone. Lorenzo finished his coffee and turned back toward his study. There was work to do, businesses to run, problems to solve, and empire to maintain. But for now, for this moment, he allowed himself satisfaction. Elena Rivera was safe. Jacob Hayes was destroyed, and Chicago would remember, even if they didn't fully understand, that some people, some very dangerous people, had lines you simply didn't cross. The city whispered about unseen hands and mysterious justice. Lorenzo DeLucas simply got back to work. After all, shadows didn't need recognition. They just needed to keep protecting what mattered. The end. As the rain continued to fall over Chicago, Adrian Moretti stood at his window staring at the flickering city lights. On his phone screen, a message blinked. He's back. A slow smirk crossed his face. Somewhere out there, Jacob Hayes was planning his next move. And Adrian? He was ready. The game wasn't over. It was only beginning. If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens next, in the world of power, revenge, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.